Hey guys, Andy N, spoken label, back in the house on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, we're in the middle of another hurricane. Wonderful. So, let's get ourselves going. Something a bit more positive today. Well, I know. I'm not sure if you call this book positive in some ways. We're going to talk about it today, but it's a fantastic novel. We're up to Astley today, chat to a writer I spoke to last year it was, and she's produced a fantastic debut novel, Karen Kendrick's. Now, hiya, Karen. Now, it's great to meet you today at
Hello.
last. So, now, obviously, first of all, then, tell us about the background to your creativity. I know you told me already you're originally from the Salford, aren't you, area? And then you lived at
Yeah,
Swindon as well. So you're up
yeah,
Ashley way nowadays, aren't you? So,
I am. Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine, like most writers, I've always kind of dabbled with writing. I wrote a lot when I was kind of a child and a little bit older. Life then gets in the way while you do different things. But then it's never really left me. I did a degree in something completely different. My original degree was in history. So that
oh,
was kind of, not
oh,
really writing related. But then when I came back to it, I just found I kind of, snapped back into it. And one of the good things about writing is that any experiences you've had are useful for writing. They can always fit in somewhere. So, in terms of kind of my qualifications and stuff, they're a bit of a mixed bag. I've done some science, I've done some history, but again, it's all useful for kind of the creative side of things. Nothing's ever wasted. That's one of the things that I love about writing, really. Um, yeah.
agreed,
So I
agreed.
guess, yeah. So I guess it's I sort of I started with more kind of children's stories, but
Oh,
as
wow.
I, got more used to kind of the process of writing, I did an MA in creative writing, and I think that was the changing point for me because not so much the actual teaching side of it, because I found, there wasn't a class where they sat down with me and said, this is how you write a book. But what we did do is look at the writing of a lot of other people and look at what
Hmm,
made for some really good writing. It gave me the chance to do that I'd never really had before.
good,
To
good.
actually consider what makes something good in terms of writing, to really think about that. And also, the other thing it gave me is just the opportunity to actually sit and write. I think sometimes, particularly because I'm working class writer, I think sometimes you have to find a reason to write. You can't give up your day job just to write a book because you
I
need the
wish,
money.
yeah.
I know, yeah,
I
it
wish.
would be a lovely thing to do, but if you need to actually pay the bills, you've got to work. And sometimes you kind of have to justify spending the time being creative. I think that's harder for working class writers, really, because, well, for various things, which perhaps I won't go into right now, but I just think for working class writers, there's more kind of pressure to just spend your time kind of earning and being useful. So
Yeah.
the MA, just as much as anything, gave me the reason to sit and just spend time on my own creativity, which, was fantastic, really good.
Yeah, I got that when I did a degree because I did my degree 25 years ago now over in Bolton.
Yeah.
Bolton, when
Yeah.
it was a uni, obviously with the early uni days and creative writing and acting. I do less of
Yeah.
the acting nowadays, but we'll come on to that another day. You
Yeah.
know, but yeah, the rat was I'd wrote before that like you, but I mean, sometimes when you get that chance, you take it, don't you? And then it just builds you up from that.
Exactly.
So yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
you completely. Did you find any writers that proved a massive influence on you when you got to this stage?
I mean, I read a bit of everything really. Recently, I've been really into science fiction. I've been reading lots of science fiction of different kinds. I can't say that there's one writer in particular that, I gravitate towards. I think it's kind of a bit of everything, but I like a well-written book. I like a book that kind of draws me in from the start and that I'm interested in the characters. I love a distinctive narrative voice. So something like Milkman by Anna Burns, that was I read that last year. And such an amazing narrative voice in that it just kind of you warm to her straight away. That's kind of what I look for, I guess. And yeah, it's definitely influenced me. I do try to make my narrative voices distinctive and as much for my own interest. I don't know about you, but if I get bored writing something, it doesn't get finished. So it's got to interest me as much as anybody else in order for me to kind of pursue it and get the thing finished. I
Yeah.
find that an interesting narrative voice is a way of doing that.
Yeah, I think you're dead right of it. Well, I've got a good few short stories and a good few incomplete novels knocking around, and it's you're the first person that's got to enjoy the book. If you don't
Yeah,
enjoy it, why write it?
yeah,
You're lying to yourself
exactly,
as well as your audience. So completely agree with you in that.
exactly.
So now, obviously, today people are wondering. Obviously, we're here today to talk about your debut. I like that word, debut novel. Now, obviously, afterwards. Now. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk about this book because it's a really, really good novel. Probably one of the best debut novels I've read in a while, actually. So really well done with this. Now,
Thank you.
we have to do the obvious question first is where did it come from?
It evolved is the short answer. It started with a single image. I had an image in my head of the main character. Um, so teenage girl, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that she's pregnant. I mean, we find that out quite early in the story.
Yeah,
And she's in this kind of horrific wasteland. So yeah, that's what it started with, this kind of single image of her trying to make her way through this sort of wilderness and to survive. But what I wanted from the outset, she was never going to be a victim because that kind of character sometimes is written like a victim, and I never wanted that. She's a strong character. She's very feisty is probably the wrong word, but she kind of sometimes to the point of being defensive. She looks after herself and she's sort of confident and she's got this air of she can look after herself in a very difficult environment. She doesn't like to let people in very easily. And she does manage to make one or two friends along the way, but they kind of have to get through that initial protective layer that she puts around herself. Anyway, so yeah, so it started with that image, and then I kind of had that knocking around in my head for quite a while, never really took it anywhere. But again, when I was doing my MA, one of the modules was a writing workshop. So it was literally just sitting there sharing each other's work, commenting on each other's work. And in that class, I wrote that first passage
oh wow.
of afterward. And I liked it. I liked the narrative voice. I liked the way it started. And so that was kind of the beginning of it, really. That was kind of where it started. But honestly, it changed out of all recognition, really, from that initial thing. I didn't have a clear idea where I wanted the story to go or anything like that. It was just, this kind of she's there in this sort of wilderness land and she's walking, and I had to kind of explain it all to myself before I could explain it to the reader. And I've been learning along the way. I've been kind of figuring out how to structure a story and all those kinds of things. As most writers do, you start off kind of winging it, not having much of a clue, and you figure it
Mm.
out as you go along. And
Yeah.
that's definitely what I did. It changed and it changed until finally I had it in a version that I could live with and I was happy with. Yeah, took a long time though.
Yeah, it feels like it because people are reading this. This is a multi-layered book completely. I'm not going to ask how long it took you because I know my first
Yeah.
novel took me 15 years to write and the
Yeah,
second
no, it
about
was
12. So yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, I would say it was probably maybe 7 or 8 years. I'd have to work it out. But I mean, that's not including the initial image that I had in my head, which was literally when I was a teenager. That is when I first came up with that. But the actual writing of it, yeah, 7 or 8 years probably,
It
something
does, and
like
it's
that.
yeah, I know what you mean. Like my first book, I said it took me 15 years, but the second one was 12, which is nearly done now. But
Yeah,
that was a quicker book because it when I established the
yeah,
world in the first book, the second one to go on
yeah,
to it and the structure is quicker. You learn everything as you go along with
yeah,
it. So, but yeah, and I agree. Now, there's
exactly.
a there's a few stylistic points that you did in this book which I thought were very, very effective. Now, I like the fact was the chapters in this were mostly quite short and concise chapters.
Mm.
Was that a conscious decision, that was it? 'Cause it moved the book along quite quickly, I felt, and it worked really well.
Yeah, I think it was to an extent it was. I found the chapters with the boy's character, sometimes it felt right to be a shorter chapter because it was just dealing with perhaps one single incident and he was maybe reacting to something. But yeah, I think I just it, maybe not consciously, but it was more a case of this chapter just doesn't feel like it needs to be any longer. Everything that has has happened is just right for the chapter. And I think with chapters, if you have a lot of very short chapters in a row, it can feel a bit stop start. But providing you're not in that situation and it feels natural, it feels like a natural place to end a chapter, then it's fine. You just kind of go with your instinct, I guess.
Yeah, now, the other point this book made me think of one before was, now people wonder with spoken label, I always give the guests the questions, but this one I've asked Karen here, so, but Amanda's, my wife's, one of her early novels had, it was very similar structure of man, woman all the time in it, and she got
Yeah.
the male character really spot on. You did it with boy as
Mhm.
well here. I think that's really hard to write a character on the other sex. So
Yeah,
I agree with you completely. I thought they were really well done, both boy and girl. Now, I have to ask you next, obviously. Yeah, I know it's alternate chapters throughout the book mostly, but why
yeah,
did you decide to call it boy, girl, even though we learn the names of the characters as the book goes along?
yeah. I think that came from girl at the start of the story. She's feeling quite defensive. She remembers her name, or um, she knows what it is, but she doesn't feel like she's associated with that person anymore. That's kind of her defense against the thing that she's been through that actually brought her into this world. It's a wall kind of against, her old life. This is who I am now. I have nothing to do with that person. And because I'd taken the decision to do that with her, it just kind of seemed to make sense to mirror that with him as well because at the start we don't actually know his name as well. He's just there. He's sort of introduced as an antagonist character, but that does sort of change throughout the novel. But we don't know who he is. So yeah, at the start of the novel, it just made sense to mirror the chapter titles for him to do what I was doing with girl, so girl boy, and then at the end, she accepts who she is, and he um, also he's come to the end of his character arc, and he's kind of a different person as well. So they both changed, and that's why I decided to change the chapter titles to show that really.
Yeah, we won't give too much away there then, because that's the next question I was going to ask you there. But yeah, at the end of it, the book has done a journey, and that's the reason why it
Yeah,
changes at the end. We'll say no more there, right? Now, obviously, as for now, with this, the book does feel very sci-fi to me, science fiction based.
yeah,
But is there anything you want to tell us about the world that they're in?
yeah. Well, yeah, it's difficult to know how much to say again without giving anything away because there's something very specific about this world that they've found themselves in that we kind of learn about a little way into the novel. So yeah, it's what I will say is that it's a world controlled by other beings. Now there are these other beings that we never fully learn what they are in this novel. But they're the ones in charge. They're the ones who are kind of calling the shots when it comes to these people who have just found themselves in this world. Now, all of the people within afterwards are they are Earth's dead, basically. They have found themselves here after having died on Earth. So they're, it's it is the afterlife, but it's a strange afterlife. It's not quite straightforward. Again, I don't think I want to say much more about what that is because it is kind of you know, it's important to the plot.
Yeah, we'll say no more there because it's very multi-layered, and that's why it's. And I think the pacing of the book's really great. It's very. I'm not in a lesser skilled hand, you can have made a real struggle in this book, but it doesn't because it's really well thought out. That's why
Thank
with
you.
it straight away with it. So yeah, now as a 40 now, when the book was first started, obviously you've been writing for quite some time now. Has the book changed a lot from the way you originally envisaged it?
Yes, it absolutely has. I mean, I think when I started writing it, I didn't have a clear idea of where it was going as such, but it certainly wasn't what it ended up to be. I'll put it that way. Yeah, it changed out of all recognition, and that was just again, it kind of just evolved. Um, it was a case of writing. Uh, I started writing, and then I had to kind of work out the story alongside the actual writing of it. And it's only later in the process that I actually began to fully structure it and think about how I wanted the story to be told. I guess, yeah, it's been my learning process, I suppose, as a writer. And that's why it's taken so long. And I'm hopeful that future novels will be quicker to write because I've got a much better idea of how I want to structure things and, whatnot.
Yeah, now obviously with the main two characters, what being boy and girl,
Yeah,
did either of the characters surprise you in the way they developed? Without giving too much spoilers away.
yeah. Yeah, I think Boy surprised me. He was never supposed to be what he ended up being. I think, I don't know about you, but my characters kind of take on a bit of a life of their own. As I write, I find they just become, who they were always meant to be. I'll say
Yeah,
that. And
I
yeah,
like that. Yeah,
Boy, yeah, Boy, I think, yeah, he was a really fun character to write as well, but he just turned out very differently than I had anticipated. Another character that did that, there's a character in there called Ali, and he's a friend of Girl. And yeah, I suppose I brought him in at the start as he was somebody that Girl was going to care for and look after. There's kind of a theme of a maternal thing throughout the book, and she's almost like a mother figure or a sister, but she takes care of Ali. But Ali, yeah, he became much more important than I originally thought throughout the book. He's actually, I think he's probably my one of my favorite characters in the book, because yeah, he just takes on such an important role, and he's a he's a he's so sweet, and he cares for Girl as well. He takes on this sort of protective role towards Girl as well as her looking after him. It works both ways.
I think as well, a lot with writing, sometimes you're doing a book, there's always got to be something of you in the main characters or two. And I know, obviously,
Mm.
I'm trying to be careful what I say here, obviously, because I know what's begun in your personal life to a degree, but certainly there's been elements of the girl character where what's happened to her in the beginning of the book with her mother's relationship. I know that
Yeah.
obviously it mirrors what you've had problems with yourself and your family this past year or so, haven't you? And I think
Yeah.
it's like almost like novels sometimes are a healing process, I think, of what's gone on in your own life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think so. Yeah, they say that every character is some aspect of your own personality. I've heard
Yeah.
that said. However, you know. Some of my characters are quite disturbing, so I hope they're not too close to, to who I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Oh, when in
you
doubt,
just
blame
do
when
that.
in doubt, blame your husband. Say you're based on your husband, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, that it's
Or your
based on
children,
him.
yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, no, I think you do kind of subconsciously use stuff from your own life and things that you've encountered, your own pain. I mean, the pain has to come from somewhere for you to fully understand it, and that's yeah, it's kind of again, it goes back to the thing of no experience is lost when you're a writer, even if it's a bad experience. You know, it can be helpful at some point when you're writing something. It's human experience ultimately. We all have our different experiences, and all of it in some way will end up being incorporated into something you've written at some stage. It just does. That's just what happens.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It does. The book itself feels personal to me, and I
Yeah.
felt by the end of it, I learned a lot about you as a person. So yeah, no, agreed to everything you said there. Now, besides that, of people researching, obviously, there were no. You're a very, very talented poet as well, and you already told me you do. So yeah, I didn't know about the short stories, but how did doing poetry and short stories compare to writing a novel for you?
I think that while writing a novel sometimes feels like a day job because you're doing it for so long, you're having to commit a length of time to writing. Say, say try to write. I'll try to write, say, 500 words every day. I don't always, but I might try to do that. Whereas with poetry, it just feels, you know, more fun ultimately, I think. I try to do the NaPoWriMo thing, the National Poetry Writing Month, and
Oof.
I know you do that as well. You
People
do
are
a much better
wondering,
job of
yeah.
staying with it.
Well, to be honest, I don't follow the prompts. I so I get away with it
Yeah,
because
well, I mean, I think for me, the prompts are
prompts are a
helpful
nightmare.
because, yeah, well, I know I find them quite helpful because sometimes that is the problem is struggling for an initial idea. And if somebody says, well, today you've got to write a poem about a snail, I've at least I've got a focus for what I write. But again, I'm a working class writer. I went to a school that was on the rougher side, let's just say that. I went to a school called Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Salford. And back in the day, yeah, it was a bit of a rough old place. We didn't study a single poem in the whole time that I was there. So poetry was kind of alien to me when I started out writing. I thought, along
Hmm.
with a lot of other working class writers, I thought poetry's not for me. No, it's something very esoteric. It's something that I can't comprehend. I can't be a poet. But then I started reading it. I started enjoying it. And then somebody said to me, why don't you have a go at NaPoWriMo? So I did. I wrote a couple, posted them on the thing, and they were well received. And I thought, maybe I can do this after all. And it's gone from there. I've just kind of grown in confidence, I guess, with my own poetry. It's I think it's a different thing for somebody from a working class background
Agreed.
who isn't necessarily surrounded by poetry as when they're growing up. It's kind of we have this I suppose it's imposter syndrome basically that you have to get past. It's a kind of a hurdle you have to get past before you feel like you can wear the label of poet and be comfortable with it. And I'm at that point now. I do own the label poet quite happily. Um, it's sometimes still feels a bit weird to me, but I probably won't ever lose that. But yeah, I will happily self-label as a poet these days.
I think
But
it's confidence. You're right. It's a lot of it is confidence from you doing work like that. Because it
yeah,
took me years to get around that myself, and I've been doing
mm,
Napoli for 10 years. What, God,
yeah,
a few years now, and it's a lot of it is I look forward to every April. It's just a case of pacing myself out with it and be
yeah.
prepared to sit down and do it every day because people think it's easy writing a poem every day. No, it's not.
No,
And every time,
yeah,
no,
it takes a lot of kind of well, brain energy. I'll just yeah. Uh, And as well, it's not just about, cobbling something together and throwing it out. You've got to be happy with it before you send it out into the world, don't you?
Yeah.
Um, I probably will do NaPoWriMo again just because I enjoy it. Um, I've been working a lot on kind of prose writing lately, and it'll be like a little 4 week holiday from that to do a bit of poetry and just add a few more to my kind of portfolio.
Yeah, probably the same for me next year because I'm more of my novels and my short flash fiction nowadays. And when I was known
Mm.
for being a poet, yeah, if you do it, it's nice to get to like a holiday from holiday basically. So yeah, I get it
Yeah.
completely. Now, obviously, with afterwards, is this likely to be a one-off novel, or could you see yourself doing more in this world?
I've started writing the next one. I think in my
Oh,
head there will be three. And I've kind of, yeah, I I'm loosely I've loosely planned the current one. I know where it's going. I've introduced a new character, which, again, without too many spoilers, there's another world that crops up in afterwards, which is where the beings that control afterwards, where they are. And my new character lives on this world. She is one of these other beings. So yeah, I've got three narrators, and I was kind of going through the thing of how many narrators is too many before it
yeah.
becomes confusing and annoying. But I've decided that three is okay. I think any more than that maybe would become too much. That's what I've decided. That's what I'm working on. I've just reached the 15,000 word mark. So it's kind of progressing and it's planned out. I'm happy with how it's going as well, and it's certainly going a bit quicker than the first novel did.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No,
yeah, I've got.
I was going to ask you then, obviously, like, how is it comparing to the first novel? I'm not talking about the content. You're saying it's
Yeah,
going a bit quicker because
yeah,
because you established the world in the first part. Do you think
yeah.
it's a bit easier sometimes, isn't it, to jump back for
I
part
think
two?
so. Yeah, because when you're initially starting a novel project, you've got to go through the process of who is my narrator, what is their narrative voice like, what is their character arc going to be, how does this character react to this thing. By the time you get to the next one, you already know who your character is, who you're describing, so it can it you can just sort of jump into it. It is a lot easier. All I really have to do at this point is work out what the actual story is, and I've got the characters kind of pre-prepared to slot into that. So yeah, it's going quicker. I was concerned that I was going to find myself frozen by kind of, I guess writer's block, but just to find that because I'd already got a finished novel, not wanting to kind of do something that didn't live up to the first one, that I'd find myself unable to actually be creative. But it hasn't seemed to have worked that way. I'm writing and I'm enjoying writing, which I can't say always happens. Sometimes it feels more like a chore than others. But I can genuinely say that I've been enjoying writing afterwards too. It's not going to stay called afterwards too forever. I just
No.
haven't come up with a title yet.
Yeah, no, I think the title of the book is a nightmare sometimes.
Yeah.
When did you know it
Yeah.
was good? The first book was going to record afterwards. Did you know it
I,
during the book or after?
I think when I think when I decided that the world and what it is, that was going to be called afterwards, and then it just seemed natural to call it afterwards because it kind of reflects what it is as well, and the fact that the people within it are it's after their mortal life.
Yeah,
So
no,
it
no,
kind
it
of
makes
works
sense.
in two
Does
ways.
it? It does make
Yeah.
sense. It's well thought out. No, I agree with you completely. So let's see what if afterwards two comes afterwards.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll
that's it.
see.
Afterwards, that's that's what I'm calling it.
Good luck. Keep me informed. Okay. Now, obviously, onto the hard sell for music. So, if people obviously want to pick up a copy of this book, and I recommend it because I did really enjoy this.
Mm.
I've read it fairly quick pace, and it's always good that sometimes a book. I've read it about a week, so it's an easy book to me to read. It was, and I fully enjoyed it. Where can people get hold of your book?
So it's available on, I was about to say it's available on Afterwards, which it isn't. It's available on Amazon. So yeah, Amazon. I think it's available on at Waterstones on the online site. I don't know whether there are physical copies in Waterstones. I keep meaning to actually go to one and have a look, but I
Yeah,
haven't got around to doing that yet. But yeah, it's available through Amazon certainly and through Waterstone's website.
brilliant. And obviously, if people want to track you down to speak to you about this book, where do you recommend they go?
Well, um, I have a blog. They can contact me through my blog, which is peculiarthings.blog. I can be contacted through that. I'm also in my kind of day job, I teach creative writing at
Oh,
Warrington and Vale College, so I
oh,
can be contacted through them as well. So yeah, I
brilliant.
teach. I've got a creative writing, sort of general creative writing course and a novel writing course that we do as well there.
Oh, didn't know.
So
I didn't know about that. So we may have to talk about that again in future for a future podcast, definitely. So, not
oh, it's
brilliant.
loads of fun. Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
love it.
completely. I can well believe you're an actor. I've done lots of teaching myself, bits and pieces and creative
Yeah,
writing. Yeah, you do. It's great fun
yeah. My
indeed.
students are wonderful. They're just brilliant.
Always makes life easy to get good students straight. They want to be there. See, I think when you're
Yeah,
teaching creative writing, they want to be there for it most of the time. They're not like coming
yeah,
in just skiving all day long and sat at the end
yeah.
irritating you.
No,
Yeah, no. Great.
no. I'm surrounded by creative people in my day job, and I get to talk about the nerdy writing things that my husband glazes over when I talk about. But in my day job, I can just yeah, I can talk about it with complete impunity. It's fine. Just
Oh yeah,
yeah,
completely.
nobody can stop me.
Before we wrap up part one, then obviously I'm just very curious. I didn't know you taught teaching creative writing. Have any of your students read your book, debut novel?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Yeah. Yeah, I think my students are my best customers,
Yeah.
to be honest.
You are. It's almost like you've got what's the word for it now? Where whenever you're doing a book, you test out bits and pieces on it. Beta readers.
Yeah,
You've got beta
yeah,
readers in your teachers, your students, haven't you? So in a
yeah,
way,
yeah.
oh, great. Oh,
I've got my lovely mother-in-law reads everything that I write. So yeah, she pre-reads everything before it gets sent off.
it's brilliant. Keep us informed about more in the future, definitely, Karen. So, well, that's it for part one, guys and girls. Come back in a few moments' time because we will be back going. Karen is going to read out something. I don't know what yet, whether it's a novel or something, and not the novel, an extract from the novel or something. So we will see. Okay. See you all in two shakes on the dice.